They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. According to a Chinese proverb, the tongue can see what the eyes cannot. That phrase couldn't be more fitting than for someone like me. I'm totally blind. I lost my vision when I was 6 months old, when blood vessels burst in the back of my eyes, detaching my retinas. Doctors couldn't explain why or what had happened, simply putting it down to a rare retinal abnormality. I was left with the ability to see some shadows and a tiny bit of light perception, but nothing else. Voice has always played an important role in my life. I started school quite early when I was about 3.5 or 4 years old. I was at a school for students with varying disabilities. Voice was important there because I had a lot to learn. I had to listen to the teachers so that I would be able to participate in all the activities like the other students and be an active member of the school community. I learnt how to write the Braille alphabet, how to swim, and I was participating in daily living skills activity classes. It wasn't long before the teachers at my school encouraged my parents to have me transferred into mainstream education. It was a decision that my parents thought over for a while. They didn't take it lightly. They were worried that I would be bullied, that I'd struggle, and that I wouldn't fit in. We tried several schools, finally deciding on one, and I was transitioned first 1 day, then 2, and finally 5. I started at the new school and made a whole bunch of new friends. I was also assigned a support teacher, and it was her role to ensure that everything taught to my peers was also taught to me, but in a way that was accessible to someone who was blind. She made the first few years of my life at this new school really tough. And voice here took on an entirely new meaning. I was always a fast, creative, imaginative Braille writer, but when it came to reading, I struggled. I would sit at the kitchen table with a Braille book in front of me, and Mum or Dad would have the printed version in front of them. And I would struggle most nights to make out the words on the page. For a long time, my parents raised concerns with the teacher. She'd say things like, "She's lazy. She needs to try harder. Stop making excuses for her." I struggled for several years, falling further and further behind in class. I felt isolated, and I struggled in terms of just being a normal, happy child. Finally, after a couple of years, I was diagnosed with Charcot-Marie-Tooth neuropathy, or CMT. It's a condition that causes muscle wastage and lack of sensitivity in a person's hands, arms, legs, and feet. So to put it simply, I didn't have enough sensitivity in my fingertips to feel those Braille dots on the page. It was an incredibly positive turning point for me. Of course, it was tough because it was a double whammy. How does someone who's blind learn at school if you can't do Braille? The education system at that point was totally fine with someone who could do Braille, but there weren't many systems in place if you wanted to divert from that. So the first thing we did was sack that teacher. And from then, I learnt that you really do have to block out the voices that put you down because they aren't helpful. And so a new teacher came to the school, and she introduced me to a new kind of voice. I learnt to rely on audiobooks and screen reading software called JAWS. JAWS is this little robotic, Americanized sounding voice that is loaded onto a computer screen. It scans everything on the screen and it reads it out aloud. So it's how I learnt to send and receive emails, research the internet, write essays, etc. As I typed, JAWS would scan and it would read everything out aloud. So I learnt by listening. And that voice has been ever present in my life ever since. That technology is something I'll be forever grateful for, because it took me from being the lowest performing student in the class to the highest performer at the end of high school. I gained entry into a journalism degree at the University of Technology, Sydney, something I'd been dreaming about for a long time. I grew up listening to, again, voices on radio, and I loved how people sounded. I loved the sound of music. I loved what the voice could do. It could teach you about the world around you, and I knew that a career in radio was exactly what I wanted to do for that reason. So Jaws came along with me to university. I anticipated it would be a struggle, just like high school was, and just like primary school, and everything else before that. But instead, all the voices that I had learnt about previously, Jaws, my own voice and being my own advocate, made university life so much more positive than I ever could have imagined. I was able to advocate for myself and make sure that all my textbooks were translated into electronic text. I was able to talk to my lecturers and tutorial leaders to make sure that they made their working environment for all students inclusive. I sailed through university and I loved every minute of it. When I graduated, I looked forward to searching for a job because of the positive experience I'd had at university. I'd heard a lot about discrimination and really negative misconceptions about disability. I heard about lots of people experiencing that, but I guess I didn't really think that that stuff actually happened until it happened to me. I spent months applying for jobs, going for interview after interview, and having knockback after knockback. Having people tell me that I'd never get a job in the media because I had a disability, and how could you be a journalist if you couldn't see? It was a depressing time. Sometimes I thought, why did I work so hard? It's all for nothing. And finally, in 2011, I scored a coveted cadetship at the ABC, and I have not looked back. The ABC introduced me to a whole new voice, a voice of empowerment and encouragement. A voice that said, we're going to give you the tools to do your job, and so we expect of you what we expect of everybody else that works here. And they gave me a chance, which is what anybody needs in life. The voice that I now have is the ability to be a voice for young people. And I've taken Jaws into the workplace with me, and that has enabled me to gain a position as a newsreader for Australia's biggest youth network. I am a voice for 2 million young people in any given week on Triple J. It's a job that I adore, a job that I feel immensely privileged to have. So Jaws has come with me to the workplace, and it's been loaded on to the computer in the studio. It scans all the stories on the screen and it reads them into my headphones. I listen and I repeat what I hear. It happens in a nanosecond. There's no time to cough or sneeze or laugh at a story or think about anything. You just need to focus on the task at hand. Because if I get confused or sidetracked, I miss my place and then I stuff up the story. It's not the only thing I can hear while I'm reading a news bulletin. I can also hear myself coming through the microphone, a clock telling me when to start and when to finish, because our bulletins are 3 minutes, no more, no less. And I can also hear the little audio grabs that I need to play during the bulletin. And while that's all going on in my ears, I'm paneling the desk at the same time. So pressing all the buttons, fading up and down, making sure it all sounds crystal clear and perfect and all at the right levels. I'm the first vision-impaired person in the world to do News Live to air independently. I've got a little audio snippet that I would like to play for you. And while it's playing, I'd like for you to sit back, to close your eyes, and to listen to what is going on in my ears while I'm reading the news to you.
High Court citizens and soccer qualifiers. G'day, Naz Campanella with Triple J News.
Labour frontbencher Penny Wong has accused the Prime Minister of acting like a tin pot dictator over his threats to send opposition MPs to the High Court. So far, the MPs and senators with question marks over their citizenship status have asked Parliament to refer them to the High Court. But if the major parties can't agree on a new citizenship disclosure process, the government threatening to use its majority in Parliament to refer all possible dual citizenship cases. Senator Wong says it's a sign the government's under pressure.
The experiences in my life, both good and bad, have shaped me and they've shaped my voice. As I've grown in strength and confidence, so too has my voice. I've grown up, I've gotten older, I've changed, and so has my voice. When I was young, my voice, it was about listening to other people and learning what I could of other people. As I got a little older, it was about learning what I needed to block out and who I needed to block out. Because if people aren't going to support you, then you might as well not listen to them. And as I got just a little bit older, I'm not old, but just a little bit older, it was about learning the impact that my own voice could have. Whether it be running disability awareness training programs for businesses or schools, or mentoring younger people with disabilities, giving them advice or guidance, because what they're going through is probably something that I've also gone through. I've realised that over time, with my experiences, I'm able to support and make immense change for the disability community. I've learnt over time that you don't have to be afraid to say how you feel, to stand up for what's right, to fight for a good cause, and to advocate for myself and for my community. Everybody has a unique and special voice, an important message to share. How we choose to use that voice is what can truly make the difference. Thank you.